First off, who am I? I'm Marco, um, President, CEO of CodeIntelX. I'm a software engineer by trade. I've been doing software engineering now for ooh, over 15 years for sure. Um, and how I got into tech started when I was really, really young. So when I was young, I'm originally from Jackson, Mississippi. Not much at that time. There wasn't many tech curriculums going around per se. We had a few computers, a few computers in elementary where they would teach us things like typing. There was this cool little program called Bouncy Bee. We would also, I would also spend time playing things like Oregon Trail on like the floppy disk. So this is where you would do like the 8-inch disc. I don't even think those are around anymore. Those 8-inch discs that we used to install, put it in, and I play Oregon Trail for a couple of hours after school. From there, I got my first computer at home. My parents bought my first computer when I was third grade, and this was monumental for me because even before I got my first computer, I would always tinker around a lot. They bought me this little robotics kit. It's not like the robotic kits that we have now. There was like a bunch of little balls. They were like Legos almost. You can put them together. You can get a little propeller to spin. You can program it to move forward, back and forth, and those types of things really motivated me, kept my attention for hours. And that translated well into when I got my first computer in third grade, which was what was it? It was a Packard Bell. I don't know if that company's around anymore, but it was a Packard Bell computer. And I think it only had like 128 megabytes of RAM. And I mean, now computers come standard with like 8 gigs. So we can see how far technology has come in that short period of time. I'm not gonna say the year. I'm not gonna age myself. So, but we'll move forward from that. Moving forward, I spent hours and hours on computers. My first when we finally got internet, we had American Online, which is AOL at the time. I would spend time just surfing around, trying to figure out how to build a web page, writing HTML. And like I said, by this time I was high school, and we didn't really have a computer science curriculum. They didn't teach us anything outside of just typing in high school at the time. So everything that I learned back then was self-taught, but I had a real passion for technology and computers at the time. And that's when I made the decision to go to Jackson State University, where I majored in computer science. Um, so computer science was interesting. I was very excited to go to school and finally get some formal education on how to program. My first year, I'm like, oh man, I'm about to be this super hacker. I'm about to do XYZ. The government is going to hire me to do crazy things that I can't talk about. And we'll see later on how that partially came true, but it kept my attention. So my first year, um, I had to take Java programming 101. And at the time, that was considered the weed out course. And for those of you that haven't gone to college and yet, or you understand what I'm saying, weed out courses are classes that make or break you in that major. Like you take that course, a lot of people change their major afterward. And there was this teacher, her name was Miss Bailey. I love Miss Bailey dearly. It's one of my favorite teachers. Um, they weren't lying. They were not like the class was tough. But it was at the same time, it was very interesting because it was something I was passionate about and it's something I was really enjoyed doing. And I'll say this, by the time I graduated college, I think we started that first semester, my freshman year. I think we started maybe 100 or so computer science students, if that. And when we graduated, there were only like 12 of us. So, I mean, people go and drop out along the way. And I think we can, as a community, there's an opportunity there to kind of help keep the retention rate. We need to figure out, why do people drop out? Is it the fact that we don't have the support we need? Is there a language barrier? Because I know, there are not a lot of African American teachers in computer science. I mean, there are a lot more now than it used to be, but when I was in school, we only had two African American computer science teachers out of the whole out of the whole program. Not saying that that's a problem, but people tend to be more intrigued or more interested if they see this coming from someone that looks like them. So that's how I kind of got into tech. From there, I interviewed. I had 4 job offers my fall semester of my senior year. Um, they were in San Francisco. They were Peoria, Illinois, um, Washington D.C., and Omaha, Nebraska. I narrowed those down to DC and San Francisco. I did not want to go to Omaha, Nebraska. I did not want to go to Peoria, Illinois. And the reason I chose DC over San Francisco is that at the time it was this company that I felt like people just sat in the basement for like 30, 40 years. And that's what people think that software engineers or people in IT do, and that's not necessarily true. IT is a very, very broad field. It's things that we can do that fits anyone's interest, right? But I ended up working at IBM. Worked at IBM for a number of years in the Washington D.C. area as a consultant. Worked at Deloitte for a number of years as a consultant, and that's when I ended up making my transition to a small company. It was scary. I've never worked for a smaller company. I worked at a large company in the majority of my career at that point. And you tend to kind of get lost a little bit in those larger companies if you aren't just out and about networking a lot, and it can be overwhelming, especially if you're fresh out of school. And in my case, I'm fresh out of school, didn't know anyone, moved to an area that I knew no one, and I'm working in these really, really large companies in a new city. So it was kind of overwhelming, but at the same time, I adjusted quick and I grew to love the city and the environment a lot. While I was in school, I actually interned every year as well. I got my first internship at State Farm in Dallas, Texas, doing software engineering. I was the only freshman that year to get an internship, and I'll tell you why. Thanks to one of my buddies, he actually fumbled the interview call that he got the day before, and I was second on the list. I'm not going to name his name, but he answered the phone. It caught him off guard, and that ruined his interview for him. I'll just say that much. And they ended up calling me. So I thank him to this day. Thanks for giving me my chance. Thanks for my internship. I appreciate you. And and here I am now. So the next year, I left State Farm and ended up interning at IBM in Rochester, Minnesota. Um, that was an interesting experience. Coming from Mississippi, I'd never been north of Tennessee, and that was my first time going somewhere like Minnesota. Um, and after that, I realized I didn't necessarily want to be in Minnesota for the next year, so I ended up being transferred to Austin, Texas. So I interned at Austin, Texas the rest of my time at IBM. Absolutely loved it. So back to the career side, I just wanted to give you guys some information on how I ended up getting these jobs, and most of those jobs came from getting experience from internships. So if you have a chance to intern, please do. It's a great opportunity, and that's how you build your skills up to actually be able to be qualified for some of these jobs. So small company, started at a small company, absolutely loved it. I would never go back to a large company after that. It was such a family oriented type of company. I felt like I mattered. I had an opportunity to actually be involved in a lot more than just my day to day job. I started learning the business. I started learning how to, just gaining leadership skills and just how to really turn my hustle into something that's meaningful. Like I always worked on side projects outside of school and outside of work, but I turned those things into meaningful projects by just working at a smaller company and getting that guidance on what I need to do to make this thing viable. So a few years later, that company was actually acquired. And at that point, I had a decision to make. I was like, okay, do I continue down this path and just live a really good life and just make a good salary, just hang out and just keep it cool, or do I go out and do the hard thing and start my own thing? So I started my own thing at that point, and that thing is what we now know as CodeIntelX. CodeIntelX is a defense contracting company in the area. We focus mainly in software engineering, cybersecurity, system engineering, mainly in the Intel space here in Washington, D.C. Um, and it's been a roller coaster. And I've enjoyed every single moment of it. I've learned a lot, met a lot of people, and I've just grown in ways that I didn't think I'd ever grow. Right? It's been a true pleasure. It's been a challenge, and I'm always up for the challenge. So why is tech and entrepreneurship interesting? I mean, important in our community. So growing up, a lot of us are really just have careers kind of pushed upon us, like doctors. You have to be a doctor. You have to be a lawyer. You have to be an athlete or even an artist, like a rapper or something, right? But what a lot of people don't realize is that technology is an art as well. It's a way that you can express yourself via code, express yourself all types of ways, right? And it can serve as a creative outlet. Also, with IT being such a really broad field, it's really you're really likely to find an area in IT that fits any passion that you have. For instance, like if you're interested in music, there are ways to integrate technology into music, and you can innovate and create technology that fits that inside of the music world. And that's just a few examples of the things I have. So I don't really like talking to people. Like I really like to engage when I'm talking. So I'm gonna open the floor up at this point to hear questions that you guys have because, like I mentioned earlier to Hamza and a few others that we get talked to a lot in these types of things, and we don't really give a lot of time for questions, answers, and just to kind of really get to engage with the audience. So I want to open it up for questions now, if that's okay with you guys, Hamza, and I'll just entertain questions from here.
Yeah, that's definitely fun. Um, One of the things that I guess to start off that I wanted to highlight too um, was, like you said, the importance of tech and building community and everything, and how kind of like how I said in the introduction, how me growing up in high school, I kind of knew like tech was something that I was like passionate about, but at the same time, like how you said, by having someone who looks like you in that space who is doing their thing already, trying to have someone who is there to who's actually doing it and being a leader in that space and everything like that. Um, I was wondering, like, what are your thoughts on just, kind of like how you was already, like I said, a mentor, a leader in that particular space, in that organization, Youth that was going on. Like, what are some of your, or like your thoughts or like your passion into like giving back to the community? Because I feel like that's a big piece too in terms of just actually growing the community. Like, we have to give back.
Right. I absolutely enjoy giving back. I've been giving back since I moved to the area, and that's how I met Hamza. I started here in a nonprofit space with Lachelle Hadley, Dr. Lachelle Hadley, I'm sorry. And she had a program at the time called Youth App Lab. And it was an opportunity for me to teach um, students at the time, middle school through high school, how to develop mobile phone applications. And that's where Hamza got his first start. And absolutely loved it. And you'll realize that your best opportunities actually come from those type of engagements. That's where when you're doing things that you're passionate about, you're not expecting pay, and you're just doing it just out of the goodness of your heart. You tend to meet people to further your career that way. People see that you're passionate. People see that you're really good at what you do because you're doing it for free and you're enjoying it, right? So at that point, people are more likely to want to work with you. Outside of that, I've also taught Lego robotics literally every weekend since 2011 up until 2020 because due to the pandemic, we had to kind of pause from there. But I've taught Lego robotics since then. Um, and I enjoy giving back. I enjoy teaching and doing these types of things because it's a way for me to share my passion with others and hopefully spark an interest in them that to for them to move forward and to share the same passion that I share. It's a way for me to share my passion and also show them another way outside of the usual career goals that are pushed upon them.
Definitely. And then I have another question too. I'm not sure if Lilo or David have one yet, but in terms of like just that, like you said, that aspect of building communities and like sharing your passion and like giving back. What are like some things that you could see in addition to sort of like that program, the Youth App Lab, that was created to, help
Mhm.
Black students just get into and understand tech and things like that? What are some more like initiatives or things that you feel like we should start to do, especially as like now we're entering our careers and we're growing, and like we also need to like give back and try to bring up the next generation. Like, what are some avenues and aspects? And it doesn't have to necessarily just being like, you know, software engineering or STEM, but just like the whole STEAM category in general. Like, what do
Mm.
you see as some of those things to like create those spaces?
So an area that I identified, and I noticed this in my career, what happens is there's an area that in college where most students that are minorities or that look like us are not necessarily work ready once they graduate, and it's for a host of reasons, right? It's not that they aren't capable or competent, right? They're super capable, but the problem is we have things like a lot of us have to work through school, right? A lot of us have to work work retail jobs, restaurant jobs while going to school, and we don't necessarily have the same time to work on side projects or build our skills as our non-minority counterparts, right? And there's a huge opportunity there, and this is kind of where I started this program called CodeIntelX Labs. I had the first cohort there where I'm going to start taking students that look like me, look like you, right? And from their sophomore, junior year, and we're going to just kind of run them through a program. And once they're competent enough, I'm going to use my network here in the DC area with a bunch of local startups to actually give them real world projects to work on, right? And they'll be making a lot more than they would on those retail jobs, those restaurant jobs, and it also gives them opportunity to build those skills as well as have real world experience from a real company on their resume once they graduate. So this helps them stand out once they graduate. So that's an opportunity that I like to see more of across the board. Um, and I think that would be super helpful about giving us a head start. Because right now, technology's hot. Everyone wants to be in technology, right? And when that's the case, how do you stand out? This is an opportunity to help students stand out.
That's awesome. And I did have a question too, because one thing I know that is kind of a problem in our community globally in a lot of cases is having confidence to
Mhm.
be in STEM or having confidence. Like I've heard a lot of young African American students say, "Oh, I'm not good at math," or "I can't do math," or "I'm not smart enough to do math." Right. So, how would you suggest we help instill confidence in our youth at an early age so that they can have the confidence to pursue a career in STEM?
Right. I mean, that comes down to just introducing everything earlier, right? Not just math, right? Um, let's just take software engineering because that's my background. Software engineering is very similar to math, right? Look at those. In math, we have word problems. When you take a word problem or you given a problem with in software engineering to solve, it's the exact same thing. You look at the word problem, you break it down into variables. You're like, I'm going to solve this first, I'm going to do this first, and you just write out your instructions. It's the exact same logic. How you think about a word problem is how you think about STEM. So once you start introducing those types of concepts early on, like when they're doing word problems, start introducing pseudocode. Doesn't necessarily have to be Java, C++, or Python or anything. You can just say, hey, write down every step on how you plan to solve this problem. You give this toolbox of things like we're gonna teach them what a for loop is. We're gonna teach them what an if block is. I mean, a conditionals are right, and then we can start introducing more things like variables and conditionals. I mean, not conditionals. Logic operations like and or, right? You can start introducing those things where they don't even realize that they're learning software engineering yet, but they're already being trained to think in that way. And once you start showing them like, hey, you already know how to do this, it's just going to be a light bulb happen. Lachelle and I, we like to call it the aha moment, right? Things just start to just click at that point.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, I had a question about. Let me make sure. Okay, my microphone's on. But I had a question about. Okay, first of all, let me just say that the whole quip about having to like work through college is so relatable because I did have the opportunity to like work during the summers and stuff like that. But it was a lot of also just like me like working like 2 to 3 jobs each semester, right? So I definitely am like glad you brought that up, because that is something that a lot of Black students have to go through because of like a lot of the socioeconomic backgrounds that we come from. But also, I'm interested in, I know you said you like your company contracts a lot and it was a leap to do that. So I'm wondering what that was like from the perspective that like, okay, you had a job, right? And you're getting steady income from there and it's safe, right? It's secure. And then like you go and you get like, and you start up your own company. You don't even like, you probably don't have a contract yet. You don't have employees. So what was it like building that up and finding employees, like, and then like convincing people like, this is a great company to work for. And then like getting those contracts. Cause I hear that contracts can also get like very competitive. Right. And even though like that thing, I think there's like a clause or something where the government has to give X amount of money to like minority contracting businesses, it's still like very little, that's still a very little slot. So then you still have to compete for the big ones. Right. And so it's one of those things like, what has that been like for you through that process? Because I'm wondering, like, it sounds hard and it's challenging, and then you have to do this contract, you have to go back out and compete for more contracts. And so I'm wondering, like, yeah, just what that's been like.
Okay. So I'll address the ooh, that was a lot of questions there. So all right, the getting started piece. I'll relate that back to, is it Devin, right? Dave. Is it Dave or Devin? David. All right, so I'll relate it back to what he was saying about how do we get it started earlier, and teaching those things early on. Well, how I got my start was with that smaller company, right? I was learning skills all along to help me be successful. It would have to help me run a successful company going forward. So I was learning how it really helped that the owner at that time was super transparent. So I learned all the things about bill rates. I learned things about how benefits were running. I learned about how, just everything from the financial side and from the business side. While doing that, I'm also learning, I'm meeting new people, right? I'm networking, I'm meeting a lot of people in certain spaces, right? So the first thing when starting a business is make sure that you can put yourself on a contract first, especially if you're starting a consulting company. So the first thing I wanted to do, I networked, and I used the existing network that I had to actually get on the contract within the current program that I was currently working in, because I'd already had those relationships. By doing good work before, they were really comfortable bringing me on, and they were like, "All right, this is great. We can bring you on. Let's see how this thing goes." And from there, skies was the limit. That wasn't the hard part or scary part for me. The scary part for me was hiring my first employee, right? um, and I'll tell you why. It's because I think it was scary for me. And before I even hired my first employee, it took me over a year before I even just build up the nerve to actually hire someone, right? Because what happened was I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this person's livelihood is in my hand. What if I can't, like, what if I miss payroll? What if I do this? They may lose their house. They may not be able to feed their kids. Like, when you're a business owner, you're responsible and for everyone. Like, that's your extended family at that point. So that was the scary part for me. And just going forward, like tackling the hard problems, contracts, and just finding people and convincing people to work for you. I mean, yes, it's hard. It's a lot of work, but it's also the most rewarding part. Like, it's hard, but it's also super rewarding, because once you go out, you set your mind out to achieve something and you actually accomplish it, you feel really, really good about yourself. You're cheering. Like, I've had moments where I've done cheers and dances sitting right here in this chair. So that's the most rewarding part. Like, it's hard, but it's super rewarding at the same
Nice. And just to kind of highlight, just to kind of piggyback off of that and highlight the aspect going from a big small and this transparency, like you had
time. Hey,
brought
Humph,
about, like,
we
can
can't.
you hear me?
Yeah, it was breaking up terribly.
All right, I'm out. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So my question was along the lines of going from a larger company to a smaller company, how you said you had appreciated and liked that transition,
Hmm.
and kind of in the sense of like building a community and everything, like you said, with hiring your first employee and everything. I guess can you talk more to uh that hiring and just oh shoot. One second.
Okay. You could also, if you want, like optionally put the question in the chat, and then like one of us can also ask maybe.
All right, yeah, I'll do that.
Uh, yeah. In the meantime, also while he does that, I have a question about like I guess how people can support your work and also CodeIntelX.
Mhm. The biggest thing, there's a lot of things coming down the pipeline. The biggest thing that would be helpful for me right now is for everyone to follow the company page on LinkedIn, Code Intellects. So if you can go give a follow there, you'll be updated on everything that's coming down the pipeline. There's some really cool things coming, and we can go from there.
Okay, awesome. We will put that in the description of the YouTube and then on your speaker page on the website.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marco, for talking with us and giving us this perspective on entrepreneurship, because it is very important that we are able to build businesses for ourselves too in tech. So
Hmm.
definitely,
Yeah, thank you guys for having me for sure.
Yeah.
yeah, no problem. Okay, I guess we got Hamza's question.
Okay.
All right, so
In that,
Hamza,
go ahead.
yeah, Hamza's question was in that transition from moving to from a larger to a smaller company, what was the significance of having that smaller community?
The biggest significance was you felt like you mattered, right? You're not just a body in a seat at that point, right? People actually knew your name. People knew more about you. I felt like I could reach out to anyone for help, and it was really helpful that it was a black owned business as well, and most of the people that worked for that company looked just like me. So that was confidence inspiring as well because they were really good guys, and ladies. Like they were really good at what they did, and I had that resource to help give me more knowledge and help me further my career.
On that note, I would actually like to ask because it's something that came to my mind when you said your first job was in Washington D.C. I'm
Hmm.
sure that maybe I don't know if it played a factor, but I mean they call it like the chocolate city, right? And so like there's also
Hmm.
like this, I guess almost I'll call it maybe a trend, but there's like I guess like there's up and coming tech hubs in like major black cities in the US, right? So
Hmm.
um like like you said, like DC, Atlanta, Oakland, and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
I guess like do you have any perspectives on that, or how do you also see like code intellects playing into that community in DC?
So yes, DC is definitely a hub for startups for sure at this point. As mentioned, I was part of an angel group called New Dominion Angels, and from there I would just get access to all these startups. Like I looked at it as like another college experience, but a lot cheaper, right, to join, because now I'm learning about how these investors are thinking, how what they look for investing in these companies. And this is how I came up with Code Intellects Labs because meeting all these startups, you start to see a lot of minority founders, and they have some of the similar issues that we have, right? Funding is an issue. They don't necessarily have rich uncles and rich nephews or inheritances, whatever, right? So how do we get more money into those companies? Like we need to start figuring out a way to shed light and help out each other in that way. So the community I'm building with Code Intellect Labs would link those college students who's looking for experience, and it would link these black-owned startups with students that can help them build a product for a whole lot cheaper than they would normally pay because they're not necessarily getting the same funding that they would get that our other counterparts would get.
Makes sense.
I did have another question too, because I feel like there's a lot of work to be done in getting young people in computer science, right,
Hmm.
who are about to graduate, to think more entrepreneurially, because there's a lot of push to just go into industry. There's not really as much of a push to necessarily go into like a graduate program, right? It's
Hmm.
just kind of go into industry, work for for somebody else. So, what resources or things would you tell someone who's graduating from college in computer science, and like what resources do you think they should use to learn those entrepreneurial skills?
I think the biggest thing that you can do is just read a bunch of autobiographies, and you'll realize that a lot of people that started, their upbringing is not very different from ours. How they got started is not very different from ours. And what you'll see is that a lot of them just got started. They just started. They didn't necessarily know or what they had to do or have all the skills. One of the biggest things that we do in the Black community is we feel like we have to know everything first before we get started. Right? That's not true. Just start. Just get started. Get off the couch. Make it happen right now. And that's the biggest thing you can do. So once you have an idea and it's solid and you actually feel like it's something that you can profit from, don't let anything stop you. Put the foot to the gas and just go.
That's awesome. So now, is there any credentials that you think that would better prepare somebody to become an entrepreneur in the tech space, other than the bachelor's in CS?
Dude, I don't think there's anything in this world that you can do to prepare you for being an entrepreneur, right? I mean, you're faced with so many different challenges on a day-to-day basis. It's kind of like preparing to be a parent. You're never ready to be a parent, right? You just figure it out as you go. It's the exact same thing with entrepreneurship, except your company's your baby.
That's awesome.
Hamza, did you want to add anything?
Can y'all hear me? Is it good now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and so one of the it was like a conversation that we kind of had, and then I David. There's like, I guess, kind of like a shift where in our community we're starting to see a lot of different things and get a lot more information that we never used to have, like entrepreneurship, investing, and things like that. And so, like, with that said, from your perspective, like, what are some ways that like we can kind of take advantage of that, especially either from the entrepreneur side or just in general in terms of like pulling that information in and to like help and grow our community?
So a lot of things that, I mean, it's really like what you guys are doing is how you fix that, how you in educate the community. Like this overall hackathon is amazing, right? You guys are informing the community of things that are available. Entrepreneurship, people that look like us in the actual space doing the things that you may aspire to do. Just putting those type of people in front of the community is super beneficial. And I think that's where we start.
Thank you. I really appreciate that because me, Leela, and Hamza have worked really hard to try to make Blackathon into something where we're building a community around education and educating people about opportunities in tech and inspiring
Hmm.
people, especially the young people, that there's many different pathways that you can go,
Hmm.
and there's many different perspectives that you can come with and be successful in this space.
Absolutely.
That definitely goes into just the whole, agenda and everything of Blackathon, which was to try to bring that space and bring that opportunity. Because I know, like last year, I had a conversation with Lila where I kind of started like, I was doing this, the coding challenge. You know how they have like the 100 days of code,
Hmm. Hmm.
and ultimately, as some people reached out, they were saying that 100 days is kind of long, it's too much, and kind of, and some people were like, oh yeah, like let's do it. Others were like, nah, it's a whole lot, or that's a long commitment to me. And so, um, from that inspiration and from just trying to like build communities and things like that, like one of the things that kind of came to mind was to just think of something that's kind of catchy that would kind of appeal, so that way everybody can kind of hop on and catch on. And that's kind of where like the I came up with the idea of like the code for four, which is just like breaking it down to 4 weeks, and kind of like everybody like really loved that in terms of just jumping into that. I said, okay, 4 weeks I can do that. And it kind of became this thing where like grew, had like a good 20, 30 people, whatever, participating in that. Um, and just on that note, in terms of like building things and stuff like that, like I know you kind of had that jump from like the larger company to the smaller company, and it was black owned, so you kind of saw that. But like actually making that like start mode thing, what kept
It was,
on like, up again.
it was doing so well. It was doing good. But I will like
Wait, am I
why you
back
fit
now?
yeah.
Okay.
So why you
Is it back?
why you figure it
I'll
out?
fix. I'll fix.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep, we're good.
Okay. What I was going to ask was, what was your thought process and like what was going through your mind in terms of all the things that like you have done as like helping out with Youth App Lab and like starting your company and everything. Like, what was that thought process or like what was that thing that you wanted to kind of like I guess like leave behind as you were like putting together your company and everything.
hmm So the one thing that was in my mind is I wanted to create a company that people enjoyed going to, that people enjoyed working for. I've run across countless people that actually absolutely hate their jobs. And when I started working at the smaller company, I didn't hate going to work. I enjoyed going to work every day, right? I wanted to create that same vibe where I feel like everyone should enjoy what they do, even if they are working for someone. Like and I also want to make sure that people you don't have to feel the pressure of being an entrepreneur if that's not what you want to do right now. Like if you don't want to be an entrepreneur, that's okay. Like it's fine. But if you do want to be an entrepreneur in the company, right? Especially with CodeIntelX, I do everything I can to help you become an entrepreneur as well. Like I'm not going to get upset that you want to start your own company. I actually went to the smaller company and told the guy that I eventually want to start my own company. And that's how I ended up getting all of that background knowledge of what I needed to actually run a company. And just to chime in on the 100 days of code, I think those things. I think the thing that people are missing from that 100 days of code is that it does a lot more than just build your technical skills, right? It's a mindset, it's a mentality where it forces you to really focus. You have to self motivate. You have to have discipline, and those are all really important skills to have when owning a business, starting a company, or anything that you want to achieve in life. So kudos to you for finishing that, and everyone else that participated to you with you on that.
Definitely, I appreciate that. And then just in terms of like the mindset aspect too, like what are some things that you can kind of share as far as just like because I'm sure that like running a business and doing all that, like, there's a whole lot of different things that are involved. There's a lot of long meetings instead of like, working a job where it's a typical 9 to 5. It could be from 12 to 12, just, depending on
Mhm.
where your clients are and things like that. What are like some things that like, I guess that you do in terms of like to manage all that and something that you can kind of share to just like that aspect to just keep that mental fortitude to continue pushing and everything.
Yeah, you got to keep pushing. I mean, schedules are what they are. You just have to take time for yourself. And as far as the meetings go, I mean, it's part of the territory. But the thing I do want to point out is that you, when people are working for companies and they're in these big companies or they're pretty settled in their career and they're just comfortable, they tend to get comfortable and not want to learn anything else. And that's you can if you're really out here trying to get it, you're a hustler. You should use that as an opportunity to get ahead because the more you're learning, there's a curve. Like after like 3 to 5 years, most people's learning curve just plateaus, right? But those outliers, those superstars, they just keep learning and climbing above. Like it doesn't matter if you're 20 years in the game, you're 10 years as a developer. Someone that's been doing it for 6 years can easily outshine you because you're comfortable. So the more you learn it, like always learn everything you can. Try to stay on top of everything, and it's super important in the technology field because technology changes so much, and you can soon find yourself that comfortable job that you have, and you get laid off, and you haven't updated your skills. You can find that it may be really hard for you to find a job in just 2 to 3 years. So always keep your skills up to date.
Also, I did thank you for that tidbit of like wisdom. But okay, so we actually have two questions in the chat
Okay.
that I want to make sure that we get to. So one is from Michelle, which yeah. So Michelle asks what it takes to build you know, a tech community in countries, especially African ones, because we have people across the African diaspora. Like we have people in countries in Africa participating. So he's one of those people. But where people are reluctant about tech. Potentially. Yeah, yeah.
I would say just start with a group of people that are passionate about the same types of technology. It doesn't even have to be the same technology. Just start a group of people that are just passionate about technology. And you guys use that to build your skills and actually build something or start putting things out into the community. And the more they see the good coming from that, the more that they'll start getting on board. I think that's where you start when you're in those types of situations.
No, I 100% agree. And I think even on that note, I think that Chinasa was actually talking, one of our speakers was talking about that earlier in terms of like just all the cool things that have come out, like data science, Africa, and Black and AI, et cetera, where there's just these initiatives, I guess, to like make sure to like, kind of bring like, I guess ensure that like Africa has access to the tech revolution also, I guess. And so I guess on that note, Kiesia also said similar to that, in order to make an impact on the Black community as a whole, how do you go about making your work accessible to those who might not be immersed in the tech field?
That's a great question. How do you make that accessible to people that aren't in the tech field? Are we talking? Well, I can't ask them. Can you ask them to clarify what they mean by accessible? Are we talking about a product, or are you talking about marketing something that you have?
I would also take this
That is a good question.
Yeah, I think it's like, so we're like Black in tech, right? But like, I guess also like there's very little of us who are Black in tech. And that's why the network is so small. We always end up knowing each other, right? Because like there's so little of us. But there's a whole Black community out there. So it's like, what do we do to make sure that our work is accessible in a lot of ways? And I would say that maybe even from the industry side, from the academic side, like all sides, what do we do to make sure that like the Black community has access to that? Because we know things, right? Apparently, like entrepreneurship. Well, all of y'all know about entrepreneurship and stuff like that. Like Dave is obviously in the cloud computing, like Hamza is in like mobile and web app development, right? Like I'm in ML and stuff like that. So how do we go about, right, making like again, like this engineering, I guess, more accessible to our communities? I think one of the ways is that you kind of touched on is like you go out and you do like Lego robotics every weekend, right? So like is there like, and so actually on that note, that was like one of the things I was thinking about was, and I think this would actually help answer that question a little bit, is and I think there's some other cool initiatives, right, like Black Girls Code, but I think what would actually help answer that question is, because you've actually like been very modest about this, but you, because Hamza tells us all the time about like this community building that you do with like other Black people to like bring Black people into tech, right? Or to even like you said, go out into the community and just like these children, like the Black children don't necessarily have to like come into tech, but they know about tech and they can use it as they need to and see fit. So yeah, what's your take on that and building community through tech and stuff like that and making it accessible, I suppose? But
yeah, like you said, we just have to go out and do it. And for those of us that are business owners, we're starting to generate a lot more income. Use some of those tax write-offs to actually donate back, give computers, give laptops, come up with curriculums, work with school districts on getting curriculums together. Share what you've learned. Like one of the things that I did was I went back to my school, Jackson State, and during the time at the computer science program, I realized, I said, hey, some of the stuff that you're teaching is not necessarily preparing us for what I encountered when I graduated. So having those conversations about modifying curriculums to keep them up to date, help them know what's actually being used in the real world is super beneficial as well. And you can start translating those things back to the high school and middle school level as well. Just introducing people like what's out here, what's cutting edge now. How do we keep our people abreast of what's going on? That's where it starts. Let them know what we're experiencing. Like people in the education field, they just know education. They may not necessarily, unless they come from the background, they're not necessarily in the engineering roles living the day-to-day jobs that we have. It's up to us to share what we experience for them to educate the students coming up behind us.
Nice, nice. That makes sense.
How many people do we have on the YouTube?
Right now.
See, right now it's looking like 10 concurrent people, but
Yeah,
it's asynchronous too, so people can like
Right.
yeah.
go back if they missed it. So
So we have more than one person on the call. That's all the questions you guys have. Let's ask more questions. I know you guys have questions about anything. Type the questions in the box. Let's engage a little bit more. What are you curious about?
Also, I will point out that if I'm not mistaken, there's like a little bit of lag. So we see everything
Hmm.
first and then they see stuff like a little bit later, like maybe
Yep.
30-ish seconds later.
No, that's fine.
I guess one of the questions I had too is like, how can we? I guess in this kind of, I guess kind of articulated Kiesha's question a little bit better, in terms of adoption, right? Like adopting technology. How could we get our people in our community to adopt new ways of thinking, new ways of teaching, and new ways of learning
Ooh,
with technology better?
that's hard, man. I mean, a lot of times people are just stuck in their ways, especially the older generation, right? And for me, with me being from the South, I mean, people are really stuck in their ways down there and pretty slow to embrace things. I think we just do it slowly. We figure out what's the lowest barrier to entry where it doesn't completely frustrate or overwhelm them. And the more that we educate people about, just have little small classes, little small free classes in the community, something really simple like how to create a PowerPoint slide. We don't have to go into teaching everyone how to write code. Like some people should just maybe just want to learn how to type. Some
Mm-hmm.
people should learn how to do PowerPoints or just how to edit their own resume on a computer. Like just start really small and build up from there. And the more that we get people more proficient with computers, the more they're willing to learn and more they're likely to embrace technology, more technology going forward.
I got you. And another question for those that are interested in starting a business, how would you suggest that they start, right? Because there's different avenues and ways to start a business, right? You can try to go the VC route and try to get angel investors and people involved to give you money, or
Hmm.
you could, do crowdfunding, or you could just say, you know what, I'm gonna use my savings and just try to get customers, and that's gonna hopefully pay my rent, right? So, what would you suggest in terms of starting a business on the financial aspect?
So it really depends on the type of business you're starting, right? If you're starting more of a services type company where you're doing consulting, I would say first get your first client. Figure out how to get yourself employed full time 100%. If you're doing something like an app or a product or something like that, if you already have a job, it's really important that you continue to work that job until you get your company profitable. But what you have to realize is you still have 16 more hours left in the day, even if you work a 9 to 5. Use that time wisely. I mean, you technically have time to work two jobs a day, two full time jobs a day, and still get 8 hours of sleep, right? You have to put the time in, put that grind in. And you mentioned VC and angel investing, right? What you're going to realize is that no one's going to invest in you. If I came to you right now and say, "Hey, I have an idea," those investors aren't going to invest just because you have an idea. They're not going to give you money to build your product. They want to see that you've put the time, the sweat equity in, right? You put your own money in. You've gotten this thing to a point where someone's willing to buy it, or there's user traction, or it's even making money. Once you get to that point, that's when you actually approach angel investors, venture capitalists, and things like that. But yeah, other than that, you just gotta start. You gotta get started. Use your time wisely. Put that time in. Build up something that you really believe in, and make it work, one way or the other. Whether that's friends and family get donating some money to get some things done, or you're emptying your savings to make it happen. How you go about it is different for everyone. It truly depends on the type of company you're building.
I see. Another question I had about, because I know you're in the government contracting space, and like Lila was saying, and I actually work in the intelligence space as well, but it's very competitive to get contracts.
Hmm.
So for someone who's interested in learning about how contracts work and how they can compete for contracts, what they need to do to even be able to come to the table and compete for contracts, what resources would you have for them, or where would you direct them to learn about that?
So the first thing I would say is if you're trying to get as a small business owner trying to get started into the consulting space, I would, if you already, chances are you're already working in the space in some form or fashion already. Use your current relationships. Look to see who has the contract there. Build a relationship with the PMOs for those companies, right? And the first thing you want to do is ask them to say, "Hey, can I come on as a subcontractor?" Because what happens is that you 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 don't have like to get these big contracts. They look for you to have experience on other contracts, and you can't get a contract if you don't. It's like a big catch 22, right? So in order to do that, you can gain your company experience. Like what you got to realize, your company is a separate entity from you, and the more like if your company resume is blank at that point. So how do you get experience on your company's resume? Not your personal resume, but your company's resume. And the easiest way, and it's a little bit, I'm not gonna say it's completely easy, but it's a lower barrier to entry to actually figure out who those PMOs are and try to get on as a subcontractor on your existing project. And that's where I would start for the government side. And once you get some experience there, you get some employees, you get enough revenue coming in, then you can start competing for some of the bigger contracts.
I see. I see. Now, in terms of um, finding employees, right? Because it's very hard to find talent too, right?
Yes.
Because Amazon, Microsoft, the big tech companies, they suck everybody up. Um, so, how do you go about finding the right talent?
It's hard. It's really hard. You just it's a constant grind. You got to automate a lot of stuff. You got to be constantly reaching out. You got to meet a lot of people. Um, you got to kiss a lot of frogs. I mean, everyone you talk to is not going to be a great fit for the company, right? So it's a constant grind. You got to keep going out, hitting pavement. That's part of the job.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
real.
Be prepared as a business owner to wear multiple hats, man. Like you got to learn how to do some accounting. You got to learn how to be a recruiter. You got to learn how to be a developer. You got to be a manager, be a people person, be HR. Like you're gonna wear a lot of different hats in the beginning, and as you grow, you'll start being able to pay and outsource some of those types of things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we did get one question from the audience here. Michelle asked, he said, "Is it possible to get sponsorship from you to build a tech community in my country?"
Um, I don't know. Let's something I'll be interested in talking about. So, I'll if you can just send out my email, I'll be willing to talk a little bit more about it. Just figure out what that actually consists of.
Okay, definitely. Like, for the audience listening, how can they best connect with you and like learn more about what you're doing and so, things like that?
Okay. For the first thing is you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on the company website, but you can also email me too personally at marco@codeintellex.com. That's CodeIntelX.com.
All right, yeah, I'll just put that in the chat there for the audience, for the people interested. So, yeah, that's all the questions I
Yeah.
had. I know we're bumping up on the hour here.
Yeah, I guess I have like a final question just to kind of close it off. Like with everything that you have done, what is something that you would tell your younger self, or like is there anything that you would have done differently, in terms of just like everything that you learned throughout your life?
Man, I would have started earlier. I would have started earlier. That's the only thing that I would have changed about. I would have told my younger self. I would have started trying to build a product or a company a lot earlier than I did. But that's it.
Nice, nice. Thank you
Wow.
so much for coming on for the talk. We definitely appreciate it. This is really big, just in terms of our trip and what we're trying to do with Blackathon. So
Oh, Hamza, you cutting out again.
definitely,
Breaking up. Yeah.
I,
But yeah, thank you so much, man. And we hope to keep having more talks throughout the year, having more not necessarily whole weekend hackathon events, but just constant
Right.
content, right, to get the word out to people about different opportunities and different things and things like that. So we'd love to have you back as well too.
Absolutely. Just let me know how I can help. Anything that I can do to help out, I'm willing.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Stated.